We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's pro football focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam. So who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with
it. Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson, live on YouTube.
What's up, Steve?
On a Monday morning. Hi.
How's it going? Yeah. It's going all right. Not feeling great, but, struggling through.
Hey, power through here. Mm-hmm. This is important. It's May 9th. We got to get through this thing.
It's the most important time of the year.
It is. It's the off-season officially here.
Off-season.
We thought it was the off-season, but it was really free agent season and draft season.
It's list season.
It's list season.
Mm-hmm. It's going to make some people very unhappy.
Top 32, one guy said he doesn't like the list.
There's probably more of them. I mean, look, two random people emailed criticizing me for not calling out Nate Tice live on the show. So if there's two people upset about that, there's definitely two people upset about lists.
When there's millions of people, granted, there's going to be some that are upset.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, it's officially the offseason. For draft reviews, be sure to go back to last week. We covered all four divisions in 4 shows, about 8 hours of reviewing the 2022 NFL Draft. We're moving on to list season, and we're moving on in formatting here too. So we're only going to 2 shows a week here, PFF NFL Podcast. The PFF NFL Daily is going to do 1 more week, and we're going to take a break. Mm-hmm. We did this last year. We're going to do a quick sabbatical because the NFL news dies down. We die down with the Daily as well. We'll come back somewhere around training camp. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to explain what we have up here?
Well, we have the world's strongest coffee, Death Wish coffee. Now, immediately, you've got to be intrigued by the name, right? Death Wish coffee?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we put out there, the desperate cries of men in need of coffee. And our guy, Eric, from Death Wish Coffee was like, hey, we don't have Nespresso pods, but we have the world's strongest coffee. We have single pour-over sachet deals. What are they called? Over there in the box. So he was like, I'd love to send you some. We're like, yes. If there's anything we will take, it's free coffee. So this morning, well, I actually arrived a couple of days ago, box of Death Wish coffee.
Beautiful.
Bags of coffee. We've got hats over there. Tyler's got one in the booth. We've got some thermos mug things, and we've got the pour-over coffee. Ironically, I didn't actually have a chance to try the pour-over coffee this morning because I was late trying to get actual, other coffee. Now, had I known...
Don't mention what other coffee you got.
No, but had I known the box was there, wouldn't have needed to.
Yeah.
Could have just come in, poured over, and gone.
So, easily bribed by coffee here.
Oh, yes.
So it's your move, Nespresso. But for now, Team Death Wish over here.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll definitely try. I'm going to try it later today.
Later today, and then Thursday we will be powered by the pour-over coffee of Death Wish. There's 2 different types we got here. This one's...
You're a medium roast
Medium
guy.
roast, and that one's the dark roast.
Give me the dark roast.
Yeah. The world's strongest dark roast coffee.
Is it the strongest medium roast coffee, too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it just says the world's strongest coffee. I assume it's
the world's
across the board.
Everything. The PFF NFL Podcast is also sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. Luckily, you've got first pick in selecting the right money moves. Do you need life insurance? What about help planning your financial goals? Don't pass on this round. No trading down here. Use your position to expand your financial education and learn more with information on life insurance, investing, and retirement planning at westernsouthern.com/draft. All right, well, shout out to Western and Southern, of course, the presenting sponsor here on the PFF NFL podcast.
The owner, well, not the owners, the sponsor of the entire studio, the Western and Southern studio.
They at least own the wall. I know that.
They certainly own that plaque.
No, the entire studio, for real.
Yeah, and the helmet.
And appreciate Death Wish sending some samples here, and looking forward to dive in there. And we're going to dive in to the best off seasons so far. So we've had months of free agency, months of draft speculation, an actual draft, and now it's time. Which teams have had the best off seasons? How do you want to do this? Just go back and forth?
Yeah.
Pull up a team.
Okay.
Which team do you like the best as far as their off season goes?
I think certainly one of the best off seasons any team has had has been the Cincinnati Bengals. Hometown, Cincinnati Bengals, coming off the Super Bowl appearance. NFL schedulers telling them they're going to have to get used to not playing at 1 p.m. on a Sunday anymore. Bengals are going primetime, baby. And look, I think they were in a very similar spot to the Chargers of a year ago, but even more kind of souped up because they actually went all the way to a Super Bowl, came pretty close. It would have been very easy to think we're kind of there, you know? Burrow takes us as far as you need to go. We got to tinker around the edges, but we're, you know, more or less, we've arrived. But they didn't. They went at this and they went, okay, we overachieved. We made a Super Bowl. If we want to get back, we have some serious work to do, particularly on that offensive line. And we don't want to go into a draft desperately needing to try and grab offensive linemen. So they hammered it hard in free agency. Alex Kappa, Ted Karras, Lyle Collins. Karras and Kappa they hit very early in free agency. So they did this trick that's becoming a bigger and bigger piece now of essentially targeting second-tier free agents in the first tier of free agency. So instead of waiting while, you know, everybody goes after the big names and the high-money guys, let's just sign the guys you want. Like, get to the front of the queue of the second-tier guys and get them locked down. They had the discipline to wait Dallas out with Lyle Collins and not trade for him, you know, not make something crazy happen, wait till they release him, signed him anyway, suckered him in with the wonders of Kenwood Mall. And then they went to the draft and were able to take what were just good players that didn't necessarily fit massive holes or massive areas of weakness like Daxton Hill because they'd already done the job in free agency. That's how you're supposed to build a team.
I mean, yeah, you look at it's just the ability to take a weakness and turn it into maybe even a strength. You know, we always say let's creep back to an average, at least be middle of the pack. But when you look at Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, Lyle Collins, PFF grades of 72, 71, 80 just last year, but over the last 3 years, they've all been above average players at their respective positions. You're going from below average to above average at 3/5 of your offensive line. You already have the average Jonah Williams when it comes to PFF WAR, PFF grade, and you leave one essential question mark at left guard, where it's like, all right, here's 15 people, go compete.
Right.
Go compete for left guard, 15 guys. And you could still, Ode Ibushi. You could always grab Ode Ibushi. So can everyone else if you really, really need to and you want to shore up that one last spot. So really like that for the Bengals because that was the biggest question mark, right? It was the offensive line, and that opened up the flexibility in the draft to go get Daxton Hill in the first round and, you know, attack the secondary, add depth in various places. So, yeah, I like a lot of what the Bengals have done.
Yep.
All that said, it still might not matter much.
It might not matter much.
Yeah.
Why would it not matter much?
Because the AFC is just loaded.
And it stops it mattering.
No, of course. I mean, look, you can only do what you can during the offseason, making your team better. I think this is going to be a year, maybe more than ever, where some good teams are going to end up with bad records.
Sure.
Average records, whatever it might be. Some good teams are going to finish 9-8, 8-9, maybe 7-10. You know, between the AFC West, the AFC North, you know, even the AFC East. You know, because I'm going to highlight the Dolphins later in their offseason. And it might not move the needle. It might not actually move the needle as far as wins go for the Dolphins because they're in the same division as the Bills and the Patriots and an ascending Jets team and just a loaded AFC in general. So that's what's going to be really fascinating. This season is seeing teams that look really good on paper and they're making all the right moves, and it might not matter record-wise. Will the Bengals regress here even though their team's getting better? It's a legitimate possibility.
Yeah.
I mean, regress from the Super Bowl, of course.
Right.
We know that that's actually likely that they're not going to make the Super Bowl.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think that just highlights why they needed to have a really good offseason. Like, if they had just said, Burrow is pretty much the reason we're there. He's good enough. We'll be in contention next year again. I mean, they might have got destroyed. Like, the AFC is brutal next year. So they had to attack an offseason really hard, free agency, the draft. They had to have a really good offseason just to avoid heading backwards at a massive rate of knots.
You just dropped off massive rate of knots again.
Again, yeah.
I wasn't hearing it until somebody pointed it out.
No, I only just heard it after it came out of my mouth there.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It's okay. It's not a criticism. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's
my
not
ear's keen to it now.
It's not an American idiom, I don't think.
No, it just means fast.
Well, we see it's an idiom from a time that predates your country, You're not an old enough country for rate of knots to be a thing.
No, we're youngsters here.
Yeah.
Just babies here in the U.S. All right. For me, best offseason, I'm going to go when we highlight the Denver Broncos. We're not necessarily going in order here.
Sure.
But I'm going to go with the Broncos. The team that for a couple of years now we're saying, good roster, needs a quarterback. Good roster, needs a quarterback. Roster's still good. Mm-hmm. Now they have Russell Wilson.
Got the quarterback.
Yeah, so they have Russ to the point where, they gave up number 9 in the draft. They gave up a lot of draft picks. But the roster was good enough, right? I mean, it was good enough that this was okay, And I thought when Russell Wilson was talking about, when we were discussing Russell Wilson trades and the teams he might go to, like if he went to the Bears, who I've, called out a few times here for just not having a very good roster. Like there were certain places that Russ would go if they had to give up a plethora of draft picks and they already don't have just a great team in place. It'd be like, okay, Russ, just stay in Seattle. It won't be better. But Denver was a good place for Russell Wilson to go, just like we thought Denver would have been a good place for Aaron Rodgers to go, if he was on his way out in Green Bay. So now you have Russell Wilson throwing to Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler coming back off injury. The offensive line is solid, but obviously the biggest piece here is Russell Wilson. But they also add in Randy Gregory and K'Wan Williams at slot corner. They've just made added a few decent pieces to their roster. Bring back Josie Jewell at linebacker, of course, the big one though. Russell Wilson immediately makes them a contender in the AFC.
Yeah, really does. I mean, that's as big a single upgrade as you're going to find in the entire offseason. Denver went from having the combination of Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback to now Russell Wilson is your guy. And okay, maybe you made yourself a little bit worse to make that happen. It's not quite as clean as, hey, you just put Aaron Rodgers on this roster last year and this is a Super Bowl team. But they did a pretty good job. I mean, you were always going to have to give up something in order to acquire a guy like Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. You were never going to be able to do it, I think, just with draft picks. So, or even if you were, it was going to be significant opportunity cost in terms of, first-round picks not coming in to bolster the roster, et cetera. But you have kept most of these significant pieces that you were going to be relying on or the reasons that you would have been excited about Russell Wilson on this team in place. You still have Cortland Sutton. You still have Jerry Jeudy. You lost Noah Fant, but you've got Albert O right behind him to step into that role. You drafted Greg Dulcich. In theory, that should work. KJ Hamler is still there. The receiving core, Tim Patrick, that's intact. You didn't really lose anything there. Running backs, you still have Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon. The offensive line is still in place. This is the offense should be very good. And, a system that's worked in previous years. The defense, that's where I think there's been a little bit of turnover, and they're going to have some work to do to maintain where they've been in previous years. But Randy Gregory was a big addition, assuming he can stay as productive as he was last year and as impactful. They bring in a guy like Nick Bonito that has a chance to really improve the pass rush even if he's just a designated pass rusher with Bradley Chubb. In theory, Denver's they're in business, and they needed to be because the AFC West is now just a nightmare.
I like where they're constructed, the Broncos, right? I mean, when you talk about, we really liked their secondary last year. Remember, they drafted Patrick Surtain in round 1 when they didn't necessarily need a corner. Now, Surtain had an above-average rookie season. Everybody in their secondary, again, using a PFF WAR standpoint, using grades, over the last 3 years, they've all been average to above average, right? I mean, I'm just looking at these position groups and saying, They're good there. They're good there. They're good there. I think the Broncos tick a lot of those boxes. The offensive line, it's good enough. Russ has never played with great offensive lines, but he also doesn't make the offensive line look good from our grading standpoint, right? He's going to hold the ball a little bit longer. Technically, they're going to give up a few more pressures. He's going to invite pressure. The biggest question mark to me is how he handles working with Nathaniel Hackett, new head coach, what that system looks like. As you said, it's a system that's been proven, but, more Russell Wilson data points because he's had multiple offensive coordinators. They tried to bring in Shane Waldron last year. That was the Rams system. It was Russ was always kind of like a boomer bust type of quarterback, right? There was a lot of downfield passing. He's always been very, very good. But last year just didn't seem to work. It seemed like a top-heavy offense where they were not opening up the short in the intermediate game. But that's where the Hackett and Matt LaFleur, that's where those West Coast offenses have really excelled. So are they going to get Russ to play within structure, or are they adjusting the system to him where it's going to be a lot of take the top off the defense and, we'll kind of see what we get as far as the underneath stuff goes.
Yeah, I think we're going to learn a lot about Russell Wilson and what his limitations are this year. In terms stylistic more than quality, because I think we know that Russell Wilson can be an elite, high-end quarterback.
That's what I'm saying, right. Yeah.
But what we don't know is whether he can fit any system or whether he works specifically within the system that he's or the play style that he's almost developed over the years. So the first point, that offensive line, it's not good, but it's probably amongst the best he's ever played with when you look at his Seattle career. So it shouldn't be a weakness. You shouldn't be a case of you look at that Seattle team every year and you're like, man, they're really not helping him out with that offensive line. It's fine. It should be functional, serviceable. I had this conversation with Seth Galina, I think, during the draft, maybe on one of the live shows we were doing, about the thing about Russell Wilson is and this is applicable, I think, to Kyler Murray as well. There was a reason that people were freaked out for years about short quarterbacks, right? It's not like it's not a thing. Like, if you are 5'10", and the people in front of you are 6'6", there is a limit to how much you can see, right? Relative to, you flip that, you're Peyton Manning, you're 6'6". Like, when you stand next to NFL quarterbacks, by and large, the first thing, not so much you, but the first thing for normal people,
the average human,
is, oh my God, these people are all huge.
Yeah.
Like, they're huge. NFL quarterbacks are massive human beings. They're all 6'5", 6'6", and you don't really appreciate that until you're, like, standing right next to them. Like, guys like Frank Reich, right? Frank Reich, just in, like, a photo of Frank Reich, you would like, that guy is 6 foot, right? And then you see Frank Reich stood next to people, and you're like, dude, that guy is massive. Dan Orlovsky, same, right? The guy's a waif, but he's huge. Dan Orlovsky's like 6'5". So there's, and this has happened for a reason. Like, it is advantageous to be 6'5", 6'6", and be able to see over the giant people in front of you and have as much room and as much field of vision as humanly possible. So when people were freaked out by Russell Wilson and then Kyler Murray and, these shorter quarterbacks, it was for a reason. And it is difficult for those guys to see certain areas that 6'6" quarterbacks don't have to think about. Where it doesn't matter in terms of, like, drafting them is, it's not like it's new, right? Russell Wilson was playing the entire way being short. Kyler Murray was playing the entire way being short. So if they're already putting themselves in position where you're like, that guy's an elite draft quarterback, they've found a way to overcome it. The question is, what way did they find to overcome the fact that they don't see the same areas as a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady or whatever? And Russell Wilson has kind of developed this style where he can drop back, right, and move around and sort of generate, like, force open vision lanes that wouldn't be there if he just stayed in the pocket and, tried to be tall in the pocket and find the throwing window. It's not there for a guy at that size. But if you're able to sort of drop back, move around, move the pocket, adjust the rush, all of a sudden you start to open up areas, right? You start to open up just parts of the field that you can see now. The problem is that's not how an offense is designed, right? It's certainly not how, a West Coast offense is designed, where it's all timing and rhythm and, like, it's not, the offense isn't set up for you to, like, just go up, bail, figure it out later,
Like Madden, drop back.
Right.
Drop back 20 yards, scramble left and right, and break the game.
Yeah, honestly, that's a sort of a funny way of phrasing it, but it's not, it's a reasonable comparison for how Russell Wilson has developed as a style. Russell Wilson has essentially anthropomorphized the old way of playing Madden, right?
What?
anthropomorphized,
Yeah, of course.
made human, like
Yeah. Just you rolled off the tongue. Just yeah. Impressed.
the way people used to play, particularly with like Michael Vick in those old games, right? Where you just drop back, start running around until everything opens up, and then make a play. That's kind of how Russell Wilson has developed stylistically as a quarterback. The question is, can he work within a different system more, or is this how he has to be in order for you to get the best of Russell Wilson?
There are some parallels to Aaron Rodgers too, by the way, if we go back. So let's go back to Aaron Rodgers' career briefly. There was a point.
Go back? I mean, he's still playing.
Let's go back through the years and discuss Aaron Rodgers' career. I'm not going back to his career. Let's go back through the years of Aaron Rodgers' career. How about that?
Yeah, gotcha.
When we hit 2019, the nerd football Twitter was like, Aaron Rodgers done.
Yeah, we were, well, not we.
He ain't good
People
no
were
more.
writing off Aaron Rodgers.
He ain't good no more, they said. No, a lot of numbers were pointing against Aaron Rodgers, namely the team-driven ones like EPA. And there was some truth to that. But like, Rodgers' grades were always still pretty good. He did a good job of taking care of the ball. He always made special throws, but the quote-unquote easy stuff wasn't always there. The middle of the field wasn't always there. And this is the same thing with Russell Wilson, right? When you look at Russell Wilson's passing chart, he just doesn't attack the middle of the field all that often. The same way a Kyler Murray doesn't do it all that often. That's just been the way Russ plays. But in 21, when Aaron Rodgers became MVP, all of a sudden he's getting rid of the ball a little bit quicker. The easy stuff, so to speak, is there. He's working the middle of the field a little bit more. They're using motion and various things in 2020 to get players open. So Aaron Rodgers adjusted to the system, right? Which again was Nathaniel Hackett, was Matt LaFleur, wherever you want to divvy up that credit. We saw an Aaron Rodgers who was not as productive become more productive, in part because he was just taking what was there. And I honestly think this has always been the thing that maybe Russ has been missing, is taking more of the easy stuff, but finding that balance, right? We charge quarterbacks with sacks every year and blame them instead of the tackle or the offensive line. Instead of taking 10 to 15 sacks a year, are you going to get rid of the ball and throw it to the slant and throw it to the hot when you need to and throw the 5-yard hitch when it's there? If Russell Wilson can do that, but not lose that natural playmaking ability, right? There's a balance between being too dependent on the system and then playing too far outside of structure. Finding that elite balance, which I think Rodgers overall has found these last couple of years, that'll be the question for Russell Wilson. So
I don't want to make it purely about height, but there is a difference between 5'11" Russell Wilson and 6'2" Aaron Rodgers. Like,
I get it.
He has more scope to play within the conventional structures of an offense. What we might have with Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray and any quarterback that's going to play at that size is there are certain ways these guys are going to have to play if you want them to be successful, because they simply do not have the field vision available to them that taller quarterbacks do.
Yeah, it's not all a height thing. I'm just saying there are.
But I think a lot of it is. Like, I honestly think that when we talk about how those two guys play the game, and they play the game slightly differently, but the way that each one of those guys has developed their game to combat certain physical disadvantages, I think is very much driven by height. It's kind of like, so remember Randall McDaniel, old Vikings guard, Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Had one of the weirdest stances you're ever going to see in your life. Like this absurd, like leg was almost horizontal at the time. Like you look at that and you're like, there's no way you can play like that. It couldn't be further from the sort of textbook, here's how you're supposed to line up thing. Like he did that to overcome the fact that he got injured one time, he got a knee injury one time. This was the only way he could line up that didn't give him excruciating pain or whatever. And then he just did it for long enough that's how he lined up, even when he got healthy. But that's kind of what you're dealing with. Like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson have developed something different that works for them to overcome the fact that they're 5'10", 5'11". And that might just be the reality of how those guys have to play the game.
All right, give me another team that you like to. Do we just stay in the entire AFC West?
Yeah, let's stay in that division because I think the next obvious one is the Chargers.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, the Chargers, they looked pretty good last year. They didn't make the playoffs after all that, but Justin Herbert, I think, emphasized after a very good rookie season, he's here to stay, right? He's in that star power elite group of quarterbacks for the foreseeable future. And then the Chargers went and said, okay, We got the elite rookie contract quarterback. Let's build around him. Khalil Mack trade, signing J.C. Jackson, aggressive moves by the Chargers, but it fits with where they are as a franchise.
Yeah, it really does. I think the Chargers and the Bengals have both taken a very similar approach to finding their quarterback, right? You find your quarterback of the future, you get that window now of elite guy playing on a rookie deal. Now you start trying to build around that guy as fast as possible. And they've done it almost in opposite ways, but the first year for the Chargers was all about rebuilding that offensive line, even though it would have been easy to look at how Justin Herbert performed under pressure and say, we don't need to. Justin Herbert's good enough. Like he'll get it done. Kind of the way the Seahawks did for years with Russell Wilson, right? We don't need to build the offensive line. Russ is able to play like this under pressure, so who cares? Let's put the resources somewhere else. The Chargers, I think, were smart to say, we know play under pressure is very volatile and unstable and does not tend to stay the same way year on year. So instead of being suckered into this idea that Justin Herbert will always outperform the pressure he's under, let's make sure he's under less pressure next year. They rebuilt that offensive line year one. They've kept hammering at it in year two in the draft, Zion Johnson. But then year two for them in free agency generally was about, okay, offense is in a pretty good spot. We rebuilt the offensive line. We've kept our receivers around. Mike Williams signs the big deal before free agency. Now let's try and give Brandon Staley the weapons to build a defense that looks like the Rams, which is why we hired him in the first place, right? This guy led the league's #1 defense, when he was with the Rams. That's why we gave him the job. He doesn't have that talent level here. We've got a couple of guys. We've got Joey Bosa. We've got #the player, number 33.
Number 33, very good player.
Jerwin Dames.
He still might be the best pass rusher on the team that features Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, by the way.
Somebody was asking, by the way, like it's reached the level of, such an in-joke that nobody understands where it came from. You can't name the player or you will jinx him. He'll get injured.
Yeah, he gets hurt a lot. Every time you say his name, it's hurt, so we stick with the player here.
Right.
PFF NFL Podcast.
He is anonymous. Therefore, he will not get injured, and therefore we will not be robbed of his greatness.
It's going to be really weird when he signs that big contract soon, too, and we got to do a whole breakdown on him.
Yeah. Anyway, so they had a couple players, but now they've started to add, real reinforcements to it. Khalil Mack, obviously, but quietly, Sebastian Joseph-Day in free agency as well. J.C. Jackson was the one you mentioned. Like, they've started to add some real players to this group that should help Brandon Staley create a defense that looks more like the Rams from a couple of years ago.
I'm interested in the types of players that they have, too. I know Asante Samuel, slightly below average, rookie season at corner, but him and J.C. Jackson, J.C. Jackson has more of a track record, of course, in the NFL, but both guys just get their hands on the football, right? They are playmakers. And you've got Khalil Mack and Bosa up front. I do wonder how much the Chargers, we always joke about coaches, emphasizing turnovers. We just emphasized turnovers this year. It's really what we tried to do. And you can't really just do that, right? You can't just tell your players, turn the ball over more, guys. You know what? If we win the turnover differential, we're going to win the game. Just do it more often, right? You can't really do that. But there are some tactics you could take defensively. If you want more turnovers, you play more zone rather than man. And then if you do litter your team with guys with excellent ball skills, even if they're more risk-reward when it comes to giving up plays, like a Marcus Peters type, you can lean that way. I do wonder how much the Chargers are saying, Asante Samuel, J.C. Jackson, guys who historically do turn the ball over well, and we're a part of a defense that plays more zone, will have eyes on the ball. We're going to try to steal some possessions here this year as well, get that back to our offense. I wonder how much that goes into this whole team-building strategy here for the Chargers.
Yeah, you can play with tactics, you can play with scheme to emphasize turnovers, and as you said, you can also target players that play like that. You can target guys that are more boom or bust, but they generate turnovers. There are guys that are like that, and then there are guys that do not generate turnovers, but the trade-off is that they are better down-to-down coverage players or whatever. They're going to give up less, but they're not likely to generate you many turnovers. So that is actually an interesting part of this whole build is the Chargers do appear to be targeting players that are of that style, that this group will generate turnovers. Now, they may give up some big plays to offset that, but like this is the argument with Trayvon Diggs the whole way, right? Does he generate enough turnovers to offset the fact that he gives up an absolute ton? And if you look at things like EPA, you can make the argument that yes, he does. Now, the question is what happens next year when 11 picks drops to like 6? Is it still the same thing? But that's what the Chargers appear to be doing. Let's get a group of players that all play like that. And if we can, lead the league in turnovers, doesn't matter if we're the best defense in the world, shut down, the 85 Bears, because we're going to turn it over a lot, and that'll give our offense the ball.
The one thing the Chargers didn't do much of, I mean, I know they added Sebastian Joseph Day, and Austin Johnson, too. It's $7 million a year for a guy that's been just okay over the last couple of years. I want to see what that run defense looks like, because the Chargers definitely, we agree with their general strategy of sitting back and letting teams run the ball, but you don't want to let teams run the ball for 250 yards every single week. You want to be able to defend the run with fewer players in the box. Khalil Mack, edge defender, certainly going to help that. But will Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, will those guys, will they help enough? Because on paper, it still looks like a weak interior of the defense across, compared to the rest of the league. But it still might be better. It might be good enough. And again, I think the team building strategy here of attacking high value positions, kind of filling it in on the interior of the defensive line to just be good enough if that's going to work here for the Chargers this year.
I do think that Khalil Mack makes a material difference to that run defense in addition to what he can do as a pass rusher. Mack has been arguably the best run defending edge rusher in the league since he came into the league. And a guy that good against the run, even if he's not right up the middle, like that guy will make a difference to your run defense.
All right, before we get into other teams, I want to introduce our newest sponsor. It's Sunday. Does your lawn have weeds, bare patches, or pet spots? Sunday can help you solve all these problems and more the easy way. I absolutely love this product because I can use it. It's that simple. They've got everything you need from fertilizer to seeds to weed control, and it's all delivered right to your door. Sunday can help you grow a beautiful lawn without the guesswork or the nasty chemicals. That's huge. Their custom plans include fertilizer and everything you need to easily care for your lawn. You can feel good about kids and pets being around. So my 4 kids running around the lawn, not worried about it. Get your dog, don't even have to worry about it. And your kid too, both of them. You have both. Just attach the ready-to-use pouch to a garden hose and spray. It takes less than 15 minutes. So easy, Steve can do it. And Sunday's offering our listeners 20% off. Full season plans start at just $129, and you can get 20% off at checkout when you visit getsunday.com/NFLpod. It's 20% off for your custom plan at getsunday.com/NFLpod. Look at the picture there. It's a great-looking lawn. I need some help in the lawn department right now.
You live if you live in the suburbs, it's a competition thing, right? You can't be the guy with the crappy lawn.
Can't have that.
When everyone else is there with their nice, perfect. You have to up the game.
Yeah. I think getsunday.com/NFLpod is going to help a lot of people here. Help all of our listeners keep up with with your lawn game. So, looking forward to having Sunday around here. All right, is it my turn to pick up a team here?
We collectively went to the Chargers there, so
we did.
Sure.
Do you have another team you wanted to highlight?
Yeah. So,
do we have any NFC teams that we like?
Yes.
Really?
This is an NFC team.
Oh wow.
I would like to highlight the Atlanta Falcons.
Ooh.
The Falcons finally started their rebuild. Right now, look, I guess you can quibble the way it happened in that they got themselves into the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes, missed out, and then we're like, uh-oh. That's a bridge that we burned and can't really put back together, Once you've been like, hey, Matt, thanks for everything you've done, but we're going after Deshaun Watson here, see ya, and you don't get it, that's you can't unmake that. Like, that's a problem your hands are tied at that point. But mistakes were made in the past in terms of what they did to Matt Ryan's contract and sort of hamstrung themselves going forward. They eventually decided just screw it, bite the bullet, let's start now. Trade away Matt Ryan, eat the dead money, the gargantuan dead money, and just start the rebuild right now. They did that. Okay, Marcus Mariota, that's not a bad bridge quarterback to start this whole thing. You end up getting Desmond Ridder in the draft as well, so for a team that really didn't have the resources to invest anything in the quarterback position, that's not a bad way of treading water for a little bit, and it gives you the potential if Ridder is capable of more than people thought he was. But then you look at how they started this rebuild, and in particular the draft, but also re-signing important players in free agency, bringing back Cordero Patterson, taking a Casey Hayward for not much money at all, coming off a rejuvenated year for him. It couldn't have gone much better for them in terms of, I think, kickstarting this rebuild. Drake London in the draft, a potential number 1 wide receiver, another option to Kyle Pitts. You bring back Patterson in free agency. Mariota should allow you to do different things on offense as well. They re-sign Grady Jarrett, the best player on that defense, lowers the cap number this year so you can actually sign your rookies. I think this is a good job as a step one of a rebuild that had to start at some point.
No, I could buy into it, man. I think you highlighted a lot of those good points, and they're moving on, right? I mean, they're moving forward, and the way, on the way to finding a quarterback, grabbing Ritter in the 3rd round and having the flexibility next year to draft another quarterback is great for the Falcons. It's just such an interesting team with Cordero Patterson and the way he played last year, and now adding all that size at receiver, well, all the size that they have at receiver / tight end, if you want to call Kyle Pitts a tight end. They're going to be fun to watch play offensively. They were last year, even as Kyle Pitts emerged a little bit, and you saw Patterson. And I think all you can ask as a Falcons fan is, have these foundational pieces, and find some other periphery pieces this year, and then next year, let's really be in a good spot. And I think that's good strategically too, as Tom Brady's probably not going to be playing with the Bucs beyond this year. We'll see. Panthers still have their question marks. The Saints are going to be good, but it's not like the Saints are going to rule the division or anything like that as of now. So the Falcons can really look to 2023 and say, okay, that's the year we're going to really shine here. And who knows if Marcus Mariota has a Ryan Tannehill-like rejuvenation.
Right.
Under Arthur Smith, the guy that Marcus Mariota got benched under, but maybe there is something to Arthur Smith the second time around with Marcus Mariota here. So I like a lot for the Falcons where they are. I loved their draft as far as where they got players. And, yeah, I think last year's roster was rough. They've had a couple years where it's really – you have a Grady Jarrett, you have a Deion Jones. We saw A.J. Terrell emerge. We've got one player per unit, essentially, that you feel pretty good about. And, it's just not good enough.
Yeah,
that was the Bucs for years. Remember, it was like Gerald McCoy and Levante David, and that's it.
Right.
And you got to get some pieces around them, and the Falcons are just starting to do that.
And they're another team, I think, that deserves credit for recognizing the realistic position they were actually in. The Falcons won 7 games last year. It would have been entirely understandable for them to think that actually we're a better team than we are. But they won 7 games and had a points differential of negative 146. The last time they were worse than that was the last year before Matt Ryan arrived, where they were 4-12 with Joey Harrington at quarterback and Bobby Petrino, that disastrous year. That's the last time they were worse than last year.
That didn't work out
in terms of points differential. The season before, 2020, they won 4 games, but they had a points differential of minus 18. So they were 120 points better last year in 2020 than they were last season. It would have been easy for them to think that they were a much better team than they actually were, but they recognize, no, this is if we're getting rid of Matt Ryan, or if we're either going for a home run of Deshaun Watson, or we're blowing this thing up and starting over. So I think the Falcons deserve some credit for recognizing that this was not a good team last year, and the 7 wins thing was kind of a mirage. Let's start this rebuild. It had to happen at some point, and okay, the way you started it might not have been great, but I think they did about as well as they could have once they had started that.
All right, next team's offseason I want to highlight is the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
And look, a lot of this it's still going to come down to Tua. He heads into year 3, took a step forward last year. Was it enough? Was it consistent enough? He had some high-end games against lesser teams. But they made the power move to go get Tyreek Hill. And I think, part of me liking this is the Dolphins, they didn't mortgage their future as far as draft picks go, but because they were in this cycle since about 2019 where they were just overflowing in draft capital, right? And you could use that on first-round picks, multiple first-round picks. They had 3 a couple years ago, even though the results aren't necessarily great when you look at Austin Jackson and Noah Igbenogany in that Tua draft. But they had multiple first-round picks. and then having the extra draft capital to go get a Tyreek Hill. And look, it's the biggest story of the offseason. I think we could spend an entire show breaking down the teams that have the elite quarterbacks, the teams that have the elite number one wide receivers, teams that used to have both now are split off from those guys. And we're going to see the impact of Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams and A.J. Brown elsewhere, right? We're going to see those guys in new situations with lesser quarterbacks. It's just the truth. They're all of those top receivers are going to places with lesser quarterbacks. But if you're the Miami Dolphins and you have a Tua and you're saying, I have to compete, right? We can't go get Deshaun Watson now. We can't go get a top 8 quarterback. We're not going to draft a quarterback who's going to step in and be a top 8 guy. What's the next best thing? Let's try to break defenses with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Mike McDaniel coming in with the Shanahan system, getting guys into space as well as anybody. You got Mike Gesicki coming back. I mean, there's no better way to build a team around whichever quarterback you have than to flood the field with these types of playmakers. So I thought the Dolphins made the right moves. Now, will this all work out? Again, you're in a loaded AFC.
Yeah.
You still might not be better than the Patriots. I mean, you're going to be similar to the Patriots probably as a team in the AFC, most likely. So you might finish second. You could, but can you challenge the Bills? If you're going to try, this would be the way to do it if you're the Miami Dolphins. Oh, yeah. Don't forget the offensive line, too.
Right.
What
that was a big thing. I mean, yeah, they've definitely made a lot of moves to try and make sure that they have a viable situation around Tua for the first time. I have some concerns about how Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and like how this offense works together in terms of stylistically. How do you fit those guys into the same offense? Like the criticism of the Shanahan offense, certainly in San Francisco, the last couple of years is, I mean, it's great. They're able to get incredible production out of players that are unusual skill sets, not necessarily at the same time, right? So you stumble into like George Kittle, who becomes the best tight end in the NFL, absolute dominant force as a run blocker, and when you need him to be your number one receiver, he puts up absurd numbers. And then you stumble into Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle kind of fades off into the background. Like, George Kittle should never be a sort of background supporting cast member, given what you found in him when he had that incredible season. And yet that's what happened. And then when Deebo gets hurt or isn't in the lineup, all of a sudden George Kittle goes off for 200 yards again. So that, I think, is a little bit of a concern, whether they can get multiple exceptional playmakers firing at the same time. It's one thing when you have the 49ers offense and everybody's kind of settled. Now you're bringing in a Tyreek Hill. You put the huge investment there. But you also just drafted Jalen Waddle in the first round, and these are quite similar stylistic players. So that it is a question mark, I think, how that's going to work. It doesn't necessarily mean it won't work well. So I can't, ding it too badly as a bad move or anything. But I think that's an open question right now. Adding Teron Armstead at left tackle, Connor Williams at left guard, those are two big moves for this offensive line heading back in the right direction. Robert Hunt should give you a third spot that will be at least average, maybe better than average if they put him back at right tackle, or I think he's a better player. That just leaves you center and right guard to get their heads back above water.
There are rumors. I mean, J.C. Treader is still out there.
Yeah.
There are rumors about maybe J.C. Treader being that guy. Imagine that. Cherry on top of this. As much as we talk about the Bengals offensive line overhaul, the Dolphins got better players. They spent more money.
Yeah. But
the Dolphins overall, I mean, they got comparable or better players, especially if they add a Treader.
I mean, look, we've reached this time now where we're past the formula for compensatory picks. For anybody signing now is not counting against your compensatory pick formula. So you're going to see a lot of players, veterans that were waiting until after the draft, that were waiting for that deadline to pass, signing. And there's a lot of teams that did a good job but still have like one offensive line spot open, and guys like J.C. Treader are still out there. So I think the Dolphins wouldn't be badly served to take a guy like that and make it just one spot that they have to get average play from with a collection of young guys battling it out. But really, when we're now saying, all the pressure's on Tua, that's a good thing, right? Because now it means it's not anywhere else, right? It means that Tua, for the first time, can't blame the offensive line and can't blame the receiving core and can't blame the offense and all this kind of stuff. One way of looking at it is now the pressure's on him, but the other way of looking at it is, well, now for the first time, he's got a viable situation to work with. And ultimately, if you're going to be an NFL quarterback, that the pressure should be on you because you're the guy that needs to make this work. So, yeah, the pressure is on Tua now, but I think that's for a good reason. It's because they've actually done a good job of putting a situation around him for the first time.
Do you think Tua might morph fully into my Jimmy Garoppolo comp? The stats are going to start looking even better. There's going to be enough games. Twitter's a great judge of quarterbacks, right? When you're watching the Dolphins, half of Twitter's going to be like, hey, Tua's looking good, taking a step forward. He just hit Tyreek Hill wide open over the middle, who ran 78 yards. Look at those stats. They look great. And then Tua gets into the red zone and throws one of the defensive back. And it's like, oh, you can't win with Tua. That's going to be Twitter.
Well, that's kind of what it was last year anyway.
It was with him. But really now. The stats are going to look that much better.
There are Dolphins fans out there that believe that Tua is amazing, and will point to one pass that he dropped into a bucket, deep down the field. It's like, okay, yeah, but
we're just trying to be honest here. Look, we liked Tua coming out. I thought
if anybody is invested in making Tua sound better than he has been, it should be us.
Yeah,
given that we had him ranked above Justin Herbert when they came out.
But the NFL evidence isn't great so far. But at the same time, going back 2 years, we always joked that he was used to Alabama Open, right? He might be playing with all sorts of Alabama Open here between the new system, the speed that he has. You talk a lot about receiving cores, and we talk both about building a basketball team. But I don't think you always need to have multiple skill sets. Sometimes you go small. Sometimes you put your small lineup out there and beat teams with your strength. And the Dolphins are going to be able to do that with their speed, with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Mike Gesicki, who's a tight end in name only, right? They have so much versatility there, so much that defenses have to account for. I'm looking forward to seeing what Tua does here. And I thought last year's offense, too, it was very RPO heavy. It was a lot of, we'll throw the little slant. Just throw the little slant. We have 70% completions at 6 yards a pop here. So I think they have a chance to open it up, create more big plays, get a better gauge of Tua. And if he's good, good for the Dolphins. You've got your guy for the future, and you're going to build around him. If he's not, it's time to move on because we still have this foundation, and see if Tom Brady wants to own the team and play when he's 46, right? I mean, that's what we're doing here a year from now this time. It's either Tua's team or literally Tom Brady's team.
He was down there at Miami, the Grand Prix, the Formula One.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. Chilling with Michael Jordan and David Beckham and,
Yeah, I had
morphing fully into
I couldn't go this weekend.
Celebrity Brady,
Yeah, I couldn't make it.
No?
This weekend.
You would have fit in. There's a lot of tall people wandering around the paddock.
Yeah. I had my buddy in town who's 6'7", actually. So I was busy, but it was no other tall people. I just hang out with tall people.
So Formula One has this thing where the guy does a grid walk, right? Walks down the grid before the race and just starts interviewing randomers, right? Celebrities, blah, blah, blah. Somebody in his ear told him that the guy, right there, that's Patrick Mahomes. Grab him. Starts interviewing this guy. It wasn't Patrick Mahomes at all. It was some baseball player that I'd never heard of. So he was just and then eventually, halfway through the interview, he was like, oh, yeah, it turns out that's not Patrick Mahomes. Somebody gave me bad info. I was like, no wonder he wasn't listening to me at the start.
It could have been. It was probably Pat Mahomes Sr.
No.
Former Twins pitcher.
No. It was some other guy. I forget the guy's name.
Oh, that's fine. Because Pat Mahomes was a baseball player.
Yeah. Either way, it wasn't Mahomes.
Who was the baseball player?
I don't know. I don't remember his name. I'm sure he's a very good baseball player. Yeah, there you go. Him. There you go. There's his name. Paolo Bachero.
That's not a baseball player.
Isn't it? I'm pretty sure it was.
I don't think so.
I'm reasonably certain it was.
I mean, it's not a former baseball player, and it's certainly not a current player. They're playing right now. It's the season. Nobody's at a race right now. They're playing baseball games every day.
How do you know?
Because you play 162 games in 180 days.
He's a basketball player.
Yeah, there you go. Baseball.
Duke basketball player.
There's never an off day on Sunday. You don't get Sundays
never an off day
in baseball. Saturday and Sunday, you play every single game.
Huh.
You play every week.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah. Everybody's like, have a good weekend. Oh, yeah. Working this weekend. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, so Duke basketball player, not Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, look at us. A lot of podcasts coming out lately on the intersection of sports and society.
F1's taking off. We got to be there.
Yeah.
We got to be on the F1 train.
No, I'm good.
No?
Ben's been there for years, right?
Yeah. Well, ironically, because Ben wouldn't fit in a race car. Neither would you. They're very small people, race drivers.
You should have seen me over at with the BMWs a few weeks ago.
No. No. Like a BMW is a car made for regular humans. A Formula One car is designed for
Not
people
for
that are
me.
like 5'6". Like I would be a Formula One giant.
Just saying, I learned some skills. All right, who else had a good everybody had a great offseason. Everybody's a winner. Everybody feels good about their
I
offseasons.
don't think that's true.
Are you going to do negative offseasons here too?
Oh, we could.
Bad ones?
Who else? Stay in the AFC because all the good off seasons happen in the AFC. Buffalo Bills, another team full in the arms race. Like we're not screwing around. We're going to keep adding. We're going to go out and sign Von Miller. They bring in Tim Settle. They bring in some players to really make an impact on that defense. And I mean, Buffalo's not screwing around either. The entire AFC is loading up. They re-sign Mitch Morse. They bring in Daquan Jones, Von Miller, as we said. Like Buffalo's not screwing around either.
The good thing about Buffalo is they didn't have to play as much as everyone else, right? They didn't have to go crazy at receiver and in these. I mean, here's the other interesting part of Buffalo's offseason. They paid Stephon Diggs. Mm-hmm. All the other teams. I mean, again, this is the story for me, man. This is the story this offseason. The Packers, Chiefs, and now the Titans lose their top receiver, a guy that we have seen dominate, take over games, and or take a quarterback and elevate them, right? However you want to say that, right? I mean, we can talk about Josh Allen's development and Ryan Tannehill's development, but it completely coincided with having a legitimate number one wide receiver. So there's some dependency there, we'll say. We've never seen Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill for an extended period of time. We haven't seen Aaron Rodgers without Devontae Adams in about 8 years. We haven't seen Josh Allen play well without Stephon Diggs. We haven't seen Ryan Tannehill play at the same level without A.J. Brown. And out of all those situations, the Bills locked up Stephon Diggs. And instead of saying, well, we've got Josh Allen for $40 to $50 million a year for the next, however many years, we can't afford Stephon Diggs. We're going to, as the Chiefs did, deploy our resources elsewhere. So instead of one to Stephon Diggs, we'll have 5 players at other positions through the draft or whatever it might be and take that money and deploy it differently through the receiving core. I love the fact that we get to see a Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, combo staying together. And then, oh, by the way, Gabriel Davis, as we always said, looked like Jerry Rice in their last playoff game and has emerged as a legitimate threat on the outside. So the Bills were already good at the place where other teams were going crazy trying to catch up. And now you add Von Miller, as you said, and continue to add to this defense. Yeah, I think the Bills, just for the Bills every year, just maintaining their roster strength and coming out of it and saying, yeah, this is a top 3 team coming out of the season. I think those are all going to be wins for the Bills going forward, just maintaining their roster strength. And I absolutely think they did that this year.
Somehow, every time Stephon Diggs signs a contract, he's still a bargain. Like, even when he's signing
by a few million, but yeah.
But those are important millions, you know what I mean? Like, every contract that Diggs has signed, he's ended up being a bargain almost immediately. So even now, he re-signs, and he's still the 5th best paid receiver in the NFL in terms of average per year. In a year or two, obviously that'll go down. More people will sign. We're a year or two away again from Stephon Diggs being seen as this like absolute bargain player, which has been the case with his last contract. Like every single time the dude signs, he ends up looking like a bargain for some reason. So for the Bills to lock him down and still, I mean, he's $6 million a year shy of the Tyreek Hill average. He's $4 million a year shy of Devontae Adams. He's a few million below the DeAndre Hopkins deal that was breaking everybody's market in negotiations. He's earning less than A.J. Brown in terms of an average per year. Like, that's an absolute steal for Buffalo, who have an elite wide receiver and will get the most out of him because they have Josh Allen at quarterback as well. That's great business to lock down a guy like Stephon Diggs, who clearly made a huge difference to Josh Allen when he arrived.
We have breaking news, Sam.
Yeah?
Breaking news here on May 9th. The Detroit Lions have signed Aidan Hutchinson.
I see.
4-year deal, guaranteed $35.7 million.
I think it's a great it isn't news that a rookie signed his deal. So for all these insiders, who are going to spend the next 3 weeks tweeting out, the Jets have announced the blah, blah. It isn't
And
news
I'm
that
going
a guy
to quote tweet
signed.
every single one and say, great move.
Right. It is not news that a rookie signed his deal. It is news when a rookie doesn't sign his deal and it is now training camp, right? That is the only time I wish to hear about a rookie signing his deal, right, is when we've now reached the point where he should be on the field and he isn't. That's when it's news. It's not news that they just signed their rookie, because it's
What else are you going to tweet about in May?
literally anything else.
We're looking for some impressions here.
Literally
And we're going to get impressions when we say, hey, Aidan Hutchinson signed.
anything else. Anything in the world.
I can't wait till Trayvon Walker signs. Has he signed yet? That's going to be a huge one for the Jags. If they could really sign it. I hear they're hot on Trayvon Walker, talking contract. And if they can get him, huge move. Huge move for the Jaguars.
I hate it. I hate that they announce every single one of those picks like it's anything that isn't just automatic. It's like a slotted deal now. All you have to do is haggle over.
Does this speak to your 25% theory?
No.
The 25% of people are going to be like, I like this. I'm going to like this tweet.
No.
I'm excited. Who was the last holdout that we actually had? Was it Joey Bosa?
Maybe.
Who was the last rookie that legitimately held out?
Yeah, I think it would have been Bosa. But it just doesn't that's the thing. It's so rare now because all the contracts are slotted. Everything's basically taken care of. All they got to do is haggle over offset language at the ass end of the contract. So almost nobody argues. So it isn't news that a guy signed his deal. It's news when he doesn't, and we've reached the point of training camp where he should be playing and isn't.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so don't bring that up.
I thought it was fun.
No.
Breaking news. Anyone else have a good offseason, Sam? It's my turn to bring somebody to the table.
Sure.
Eagles?
The Eagles had a good one.
I'll take the Eagles. They didn't have. So this is just based off the draft, really.
Yeah.
Because it's not like in free agency.
It's the draft and Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, right. I mean, they were, but I think that might be part of the play here, right? I mean, they didn't overdo it in free agency. I think the roster was in this spot where they've pretty much in a rebuild, but they also didn't have massive holes and question marks everywhere. You definitely wanted to get younger on the defensive line. They've started to do that over the last couple of years. But they went and got A.J. Brown. So all the teams that are getting the shiny objects, whether it works or not, I think the process is sound. I think it's the right move. Now, if it doesn't work, right, if the Raiders' offense, let's start with the Eagles. If the Eagles' offense doesn't get much better, and if the Dolphins' offense doesn't get much better, and if the Raiders don't get much better, and who's the other one I'm missing? Is there one other? Who's the other receiver? Oh, that's it. If those offenses don't get much better, then maybe we rethink the impact of wide receiver one, right? But I think process-wise, if you have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, who did well last year, he was fine. Good season by Jalen Hurts. But if you have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, rookie year, rookie deal, and the whole thing, this is the right process. The only way you can take a massive step forward offensively is to take a massive step forward as far as your receiving core goes, and you can either do that by signing two guys, drafting two guys, having two or three players, or getting one plus, but one in particular that's going to really make everybody better.
The Eagles, I don't know if there's a team out there over the last sort of however many years that has had, generally speaking, better process with their front office moves than Philadelphia. I also don't know there's a better team, or that there's a team out there that's had more bad luck with how those things have worked out. And they're sort of the perfect embodiment of how running an NFL team feels a lot like a poker game, where every time when you hear about the analytics and process and how these things are supposed to work, the idea is you just want to get your money in with the best hand every time, right? And it doesn't mean that you're going to get the best results. Sometimes you get your money in with the best hand and you suck out. The other guy wins, even though he had a much smaller chance of making that happen. But the point is, if you do that over a long period of time, the odds will eventually break in your favor. But you have to be prepared to live with the short-term variance of sometimes you're going to get screwed. And the Eagles seem to have done that quite a lot recently. I think they've generally made a lot of really sound moves and a lot of sound process decisions. but they end up with, Jalen Reagor and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and things went south for Philadelphia quite a lot with a lot of the moves that they made, and it's in poker you can go broke, right, without doing anything wrong. Essentially, you get your money in with the best hand, and you catch an unlucky card. In the NFL, everybody can get fired by just getting unlucky. Like, you made the right calls, you made the right decisions, the process was sound, and you just were subject to the bad luck of the draft, and you picked the wrong guy. And
sometimes you pick the wrong player.
Right. Yeah. But okay, it's not like that's entirely independent of your fault, right? Like, you selected that guy. But the draft there's still a reason it's called a crapshoot, right? Everybody's strike rate is bad. Nobody is batting 1,000 here. You're going to pick bad players. Everybody is. The problem is, if you do that when you made a move that is seen as questionable in the first place, and then you end up with a bad player. It's just very easy in the NFL to be a victim of circumstance and a victim of bad luck. And even if you made procedurally correct moves, you're on the hot seat all of a sudden because you end up just a bit unlucky. Like, I think the Eagles overall have, I don't know there's a better team out there in terms of how they've been making moves for the last 4-5 years. And if, Howie hadn't had a good offseason this year, he could have been on the hot seat in a major way.
And that was – so I agree with you overall. I think their process has been sound and everything. And that was even making the move to try to, keep that 2017 team that won the Super Bowl, keeping them together maybe a hair longer than they could have. And it looked like it would have been – coming out of that, it could have been this crazy multi-year rebuild. But I think that's what maybe teams like the Eagles – maybe even the Saints, teams that have been aggressive in different ways. I think they're changing their perception, right? I think there used to be this perception that you have this Super Bowl window. When you're in the window, go crazy, but when you get out of the window, you're in trouble. Your organization's you're gonna fall flat. You're gonna have to rebuild for 5 years. And look, the Saints still have to figure out quarterback. If they don't get a quarterback, they're immediately going to be working from behind because they don't have a quarterback that's as good as Drew Brees during their big Super Bowl window. But the Saints have maintained a pretty good roster. I think the Eagles looked like they really had to crash and burn, but I think they've come out of it a lot quicker than I anticipated, right? Than I think maybe historically we would anticipate when you say, okay, you've got all these players getting older and the Zach Ertzes of the world and the Jason Peters of the world, all of these starting positions, and you're moving on from Carson Wentz and all that stuff. But they turned it around pretty quickly, I think, in Philadelphia overall. So
yeah,
I'm with you. I think they've done a good work there.
I think they've done a great job of maintaining the hedge, right? That Jalen Hurts may be the answer, but might not be equally. So they've maintained a stockpile of first-round picks, and they've kicked them into the future so that if it does go south, they can make aggressive moves up in the draft and go after a quarterback. And they haven't needed to yet, or they haven't found the draft where it makes sense, but they've kept that going, right? They traded out of this year, not out of the first round. They traded one of their first-round picks this year for a future first so that they're, again, in a similar position to be able to have draft capital in the first round and make an aggressive move if they need to. These are all smart things to do if you don't have a guaranteed star at quarterback, which they don't yet. Like, Jalen Hurts has been okay. He's been adequate. He might get better, but he clearly isn't Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert or a guy that you have zero doubts about and can therefore deploy all of that resources in making the team right now better. So these are all smart things that they've been doing.
I want to turn the conversation a little bit because these are fun talks, right? I mean, these are all teams that we think have done good things and made the right moves from a process standpoint. All that said, it might not matter because let's not forget the starting point of where, say, the Kansas City Chiefs are or the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes on their respective rosters. It looks on the surface like an uncomfortable offseason maybe for the Chiefs. A little bit of turnover, maybe a step back to take 2 steps forward later. For the Packers, it's tough to see how their offense is going to be better without Devontae Adams and with multiple additions at wide receiver. But the Packers and the Chiefs are still probably going to be competing for the number 1 seed. So certainly the draft doesn't matter as far as instant impact for this year. I mean, it's not like unless you hit on those draft picks, having say if having, say, a bad draft isn't going to crush you for the season necessarily. So the Packers and Chiefs, I think, are going to be the other real fascinating stories this year, right? Losing some stars, not winning the offseason, not doing anything fun and shiny and crazy, but maybe the Packers did get better through the draft defensively. Maybe the Chiefs' strategy of spreading the wealth on offense is going to pay dividends both short and long term for that offense. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs and the Packers? Because they're not going to be in our win the offseason discussion, but they're still just as good as they were last year pretty much, but not making the shiny moves might keep them from a championship, and then that's where maybe the difference is.
I mean, so the Chiefs, I think, did a decent job of taking the resources that they didn't want to give to Tyreek Hill and allocating them elsewhere. They bring in Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who at least brings you the deep speed. You know, he's obviously not Tyreek Hill. He doesn't have close to the breadth of skills that Tyreek Hill does, but he can scare teams deep, and that's an important thing to have in an offense that they probably wouldn't have had outside of that. Like Mecole Hardman is a different type of speed. Juju Smith-Schuster obviously isn't that guy. That would have been a missing skill set if they had let Tyreek Hill walk and hadn't replaced it with anything. So to bring in Valdes-Scantling is good. Bringing in Sky Moore in the second round I think is a freaking steal, and like he should be an important part of that offense. Juju Smith-Schuster should be a better player for them than he was in Pittsburgh with the declining force of Ben Roethlisberger trying to get him the ball. And then critically, that offensive line should be amongst the best in the NFL again. Orlando Brown, Joe Thuney, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Lucas Niang. Like Lucas Niang is the weakest link in that group, and he could easily be an average starter, and he's probably going to have competition behind him in terms of, you know, Darian Kennard, guys they've drafted. Like, their offensive line should be one of the best in the NFL, protecting Patrick Mahomes.
Again, though.
There's only so much. You can only be so bad when that's the case. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But, I mean, the Chiefs' offensive line got better last year. It may have been the best offensive line they've ever had.
Yeah, and
with
they
Patrick
were
Mahomes.
a contender last year.
Yeah, but they got worse offensively, too. They got worse offensively with the best offensive line they've had.
But they then improved the defense fairly dramatically. Like George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie, they've added some serious players to this group. So the defense, I think, should be significantly better. The offense has done a pretty good job of, I suspect, taking a lateral step rather than taking a big step backwards despite trading away Tyreek Hill. The Packers, though, I think are probably significantly worse, even if they got better on defense. They traded away their star receiver, and their patching up of that has been Christian Watson in the second round, Romeo Doubs, where they get him the fourth, and then the sort of aged veterans that haven't really been getting it done. Sammy Watkins, Alan Lazard, who was fine but wasn't good enough when Devontae Adams was there, Randall Cobb. Like, this is not a good receiving core. It wasn't a good receiving core even when Devontae Adams was there, and he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. Without Devontae Adams, it's hard to look at this group and say, oh, they'll definitely be amazing, particularly when their offensive line should be fine, but it's not, I don't think, as good as Kansas City's. So the Chiefs can at least look at theirs and say, we'll have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL and Patrick Mahomes and a reasonable group of wide receivers. We should be more than fine. The Packers are looking at it and saying, okay, we've got Aaron Rodgers. We have an offensive line that's got some good players but has got some weak areas. We've got a wide receiver group that doesn't have an awful lot at all. I just think they're working way further behind the eight ball than the Chiefs are. And even if they did improve the defense in terms of, the draft with Devontae Wyatt, et cetera.
Quay Walker.
Yes. It's hard to look at that group and say they did anything other than take a pretty big step backwards.
And even all that said, they're still going to be right there in the mix, just like the Chiefs are. It's going to be a bounce here, a bounce there. That's still the reality. I think that they're going to be right there. My question with Aaron Rodgers now, the back-to-back MVP seasons, look, even if the offense got stalled in the playoffs last year, that's not – just because they scored 10 points against the 49ers in the playoffs, that's not a reason to believe, like, well, they weren't going to win the Super Bowl if they just rolled back the same offense again. I mean, sure they could have. But I think they've gotten worse offensively.
It's really tough it's really tough when you get to the gap between, bad and passable is an easy one to understand, right? If you suck, you need to make some significant moves and you get back to average. And then when you're a team that's average, you can see a pathway to being good. But what's difficult to square is when you're a really good team and you're already a contender, how many losses in the playoffs actually mean something more than simply you ran up against another really good team. Like when you go back to those teams, like the 49ers and the Cowboys, right, back in the 80s and 90s, when the 49ers team was running up against an elite Cowboys team in the NFC Championship and losing, was that a fundamental problem with what the 49ers were doing, or were they simply running into another dynastic quality team at the same time, and there's only so many wins that can go around, right? Taking it back to rugby for a moment, right?
Yeah, do it, please.
Leinster in the Heineken Cup semifinal this upcoming week.
Heineken Cup semifinal, yeah.
Leinster keep crapping out in the semifinals, right? And if you listen to the narrative on that, it's like, well, they've found they've got a level. They need to find the next step. They need to get beyond it. Like, okay, but isn't it just a case of like every year there's like 4 good teams in Europe, and once you get to the semifinals, they're all there. So if you don't win that game, it doesn't mean that you suck. It just means that like you ran into one of the other elite teams in Europe, and eventually like everybody except one team has to lose, right? Only one team is winning the championship at the end of it. Only one team is winning the Super Bowl. So if you lose in the AFC or the NFC championship game a couple of times in a row, does that mean like you've hit a level and you need to find something to catapult you over the top and make that Super Bowl? Or does it just mean you're actually doing the right thing, you've just lost 2 or 3 times in a row? That, I think, is the question that like Green Bay and Kansas City are going to be asking themselves. How many losses in like the title game, the NFC or the AFC title game, is actually representative of a fundamental problem or a ceiling that the team has that's a step below the Super Bowl? And how much of it is actually this should be seen as an indication that we're doing exactly the right thing because we're in this game every year, and eventually, like, we're going to win one of these games, and then we've done the job.
I mean, that's my point with the Chiefs all the time, right? Like when the Chiefs won their first Super Bowl, we did it. We overreacted. All right, this team looks unstoppable. Patrick Mahomes, how many Super Bowls? Over, under 6.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Now, and that's why I've always compared the Chiefs to the Patriots. If the Chiefs, and let's just say the Packers, right?
And isn't that like that sort of emblematic of the Patriots, right? Is that they were essentially, let's just put ourselves in the AFC title game every year. And we're going to win some of those, we're going to lose some of those, but like that's what we're shooting for.
Right.
Because like if they lose, 2 or 3 of those in a row, it's not, and this was the narrative, like, oh, maybe they're cooked. Maybe the Patriots and Belichick and Brady, maybe it's done.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not going to win another Super Bowl. Maybe they've hit their level now, and it's not where it used to be. It's not where the 2007 Patriots were, right? But ultimately, they just kept going. And as long as we keep putting ourselves in the AFC title game every year, we're going to win some of those games, and then we're going to win more championships.
Well, the point that I would make there, though, is that they had a better chance of winning when they were strong on the perimeter, at receiver, when they did make moves at corner and had Darrelle Revis, say, in 2014, or eventually when they got Stephon Gilmore. And then every now and again, you run into the 2018 Patriots where Brady takes a bit of a step back. They've got Cordero Patterson and Philip Dorsett as their outside receivers. They had an aging Gronk, and they win it. They win the Super Bowl. Like that's, if the Packers win this year, that's what it'll feel like, right? It's like you had a better team last year. The Patriots in 2017 had a better team than they did in 2018. Overall, flashier team, better overall team, more consistent team. But they lost in 2017, they won in 18. If the Packers win this year, that's what it'll feel like. It's not impossible. It's probably just a little bit less likely than it was. I would say the same thing with the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs had, even though the offense wasn't great last year, what the potential that they had on the field with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, we've seen what they've done in the past. I don't think they'll be as good this year. They could, but they still could find a way to play better and actually win the thing.
I mean, I think Kansas City might be every bit as good this year as they were.
Could
like,
be,
I think
because they really weren't great for a lot of the season last year. I'm sorry.
I think they've done a good job of sort of maintaining that level, of doing exactly what we just talked about, of let's just put ourselves in the AFC Championship every year, or as close to that as we can get. Kansas City, I think, has done a reasonable job of this offseason they've probably tread water, maybe taken a lateral step. They're pretty much where they were. Now, the rest of the AFC appears to have gotten better, so by comparison, maybe they've taken a step back. But they should be an absolute contender for the AFC Championship this year. Green Bay, though, I wonder if they have fallen into that trap of saying, well, we've reached this level. We keep losing in the NFC Championship game. We keep losing in the playoffs. We need to overhaul it. We need to do something dramatically different because it's not working. They also, I think, have been the victim of circumstance in that, sort of. The Devontae Adams thing is it's different from the other wide receiver deals. Kansas City just looked at Tyreek Hill and said, we don't want to pay you $30 million a year, so we're going to trade you away. Bye-bye. Green Bay spent so long trying to get Devontae Adams under contract whilst the Aaron Rodgers thing was percolating in the background as well, and the DeAndre Hopkins contract screwing everybody up, that they basically spent so long jerking him around that when they finally decided, okay, fine, we'll pay it to you, he was like, no, I'm done. I'm so pissed off with how these negotiations are going. I'm going to my college quarterback, Derek Carr, over there, and I'm going to play for them instead. So you can look at this on the one hand and say, well, Green Bay didn't want to lose Devontae Adams. They were willing to pay him the same contract that the Raiders were willing to pay him. And then the other way of looking at it is, yeah, but only after they jerked him around so much that he got sick of it and wanted out. So it doesn't necessarily indicate that Green Bay wants to go in a dramatically different direction than they had in previous seasons. On the other hand, they put themselves in that position where they might have to.
That's why I'm saying I think it's the story of the NFL this year. Elite quarterbacks, elite receivers, the impact. We always talk about if you don't have the elite quarterback, stock up at playmaker. Can you really do that, right? I mean, let's see what happens here. So we'll have plenty to talk about this offseason as far as all of these moves.
Have you got anybody else that deserves a mention? Because I think there's a couple more teams that we can at least nod to.
The Bucs.
The Bucs.
I mean, Tom Brady was going to retire.
Did retire.
He did retire for 30 days,
yes.
40 days in the wilderness, and then comes back, and all of a sudden you go from what are you going to do in Tampa Bay for the next few years? And now,
once he couldn't buy the Dolphins, apparently he came back.
He made a failed purchase.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus wouldn't fail a purchase, so can we stop the comps there?
Sure.
Thanks. Or Moses. Neither one. So the Bucs had a good offseason because they didn't completely get the band back together, but it's pretty close. And the, biggest band-aid there is Brady.
Yeah, simply avoiding not having a non-Brady quarterback is a win for Tampa Bay. There was a period of time where we were like, no, let's talk up Kyle Trask. Yeah. Not having to do that as we head into the season, I think, is a win for Tampa Bay. So I could see Tampa Bay in that bucket. Who else did I want to mention? I want to mention the Giants. So the Giants, I think, won simply by the people they hired. The old regime out. You bring in Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, I think, is a huge win for that team in terms of the people you've hired. Didn't have the flexibility to do a ton in free agency, tinkered around the edges, fine, that's about all you could do. Had a pretty good draft in the first round, which is the most important round for them. Went off the rails a little bit as it went down. And then we get to see what Brian Daboll can do with Daniel Jones this year. So I think the Giants had a good offseason just in terms of hiring the right people. I think the Jets had a great offseason. They did a good job in free agency and the draft. So love what they did. Who else was I going to focus on here? I had another team that
football
I wanted to
team?
mention.
No, you're not a Wentz guy, so not the football team.
I think the Colts didn't do a bad job given they decided to drop kick Carson Wentz out of the building.
Agree with the Colts. Texans?
Yes, Texans. So the Texans finally get rid of Deshaun Watson. It's finally done. They get to start that deal despite the lawsuits and everything hanging over him. Nick Caserio did, in fact, get the draft haul that he was holding out for the whole way. And it would be pretty easy to paint a picture where that entire thing went to hell, right?
Yeah.
How do you possibly expect to trade 3 first-round picks for a dude with 22 lawsuits hanging over his head? That seemed insane, right? They were Deshaun Watson sat on the bench all last year despite being active, essentially. They wasn't on an exempt list. There wasn't a reason they couldn't have been playing him. They just voluntarily decided to park him because of everything that was going on. Holding out for this giant trade that seemed farcical at one point. So Nick Caserio ends up getting the haul. They get rid of Deshaun Watson, and now they can start this rebuild process. So honestly, they're winners simply by achieving that. Getting that trade haul for Deshaun Watson, giving everything hanging over him right now, is frankly pretty miraculous.
Yeah, I agree on the Texans. Definitely the Jets. I think they moved in the right direction. I think the Jaguars will be interesting because we definitely overpaid for a bunch of free agents, but they'll be better.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you're saying now with these teams, it's not so much for this year, but it's at least setting the pieces in place for the next year. Unfortunately, I do think it's going to be a top-heavy NFL this year.
But it
feels top-heavy.
But the top is so big. Like it will be, but when we did a post-free agency roundup and we were like power ranking the AFC, like you were like 12 teams deep and they were still good. Like there's going to be good AFC teams that don't make the playoffs.
No, I get it. I know. But last year, I think it's more just on a week-to-week basis, like when the Giants play one of those AFC teams or even the Jets. I mean, we thought the Jets moved all in the right direction. Are they going to be within a touchdown as far as pregame spread goes? Like, are they going to be within a touchdown of the Browns or the Ravens or the Broncos or the Chiefs or any of them?
I mean, the Jets and the Dolphins they're in that bucket where I think they might have gotten a lot better and they might still be a mile away from the best teams in the AFC. I think what you're going to see, it's not so much top heavy, it's almost been polarized. You're either an elite team or you stink. Like we're going to see these. I mean, you talked about it before. Last year felt like there was more double-digit point spreads than we've ever seen before. Like you go in, it's like, oh, this is a 14-point spread this game. It's an automatic ass kicking for one team.
No.
I think you're going to see half the games this year. They're either great games between two really good teams, or it's like good team versus bad team. We're going to see a 2-touchdown spread.
And I think why that is now Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson have both quarterbacked losing teams in their last respective seasons, right? But they were on not so good rosters. Now they've been placed on good rosters, right? I mean, I think that's a big part of it, right? Is that the deployment of top quarterbacks is now surrounded by good rosters rather than, hey, Deshaun Watson's trying to elevate this Texans team or Russell Wilson's trying to elevate this Seattle Seahawks team. Now they've been placed in good situations. I wouldn't put the Dolphins and the Jets in the same bucket, though. I would love to see the Jets take a huge step forward, though. Like Zach Wilson, that's the other part, too. We've seen so many quarterbacks make that big year 2 jump. Will Zach Wilson, will Trevor Lawrence, will Justin Fields, even in a lesser situation in Chicago? Will those guys take a huge year 2 jump? Maybe not to the MVP candidacy that, a Joe Burrow or a Kyler Murray or Carson Wentz had, Lamar Jackson, but if those guys become top 15 quarterbacks, the Jags and the Jets or the Bears or the Niners or whoever with Trey Lance, all of those teams will look completely different as well.
Sure.
So it's May.
It is May.
We have a lot of time to discuss it. Some programming notes coming up. We got some vacations planned, because it's the offseason here.
Off-season.
So I'm going to likely miss the next 2 shows here, assuming we continue with our vacation to Florida.
Okay.
It's the plan right now. So you have some guests coming on, and then you're going cross country, and I'm going to have all sorts of special guests.
Yeah. So we have the doctor, Eric Eager, is going to come on Thursday's show, and then
always nice to let the little people have a shot here on the big show.
Right. And then Austin Gale is going to be on next Monday's show. So email us questions, topics that you would like to hear us dive into with the doctor and with Austin Gale. NFL Podcast at PFF.com. Fire in any kind of suggestions that's there on the screen, YouTube. Any suggestions that we can fill a show with for Austin and for Eric, 2 different shows. So sketching out that full road trip thing, almost complete. I need somewhere to stop between New Orleans and Orlando. So somewhere in the Florida panhandle that isn't hell.
Mobile, Alabama. Stop in Mobile.
So anybody that has suggestions about, a cool place to stop that isn't, a spring break party town hell type of place.
You and your dad don't want to
throw in some suggestions.
Don't want to spring break it.
Doesn't feel like not at the end of a trip like that.
So between New Orleans and Orlando.
Yeah, somewhere along the panhandle there. Like there's a bunch of places that are just generally beach towns that look nice, but I have no idea what's like.
Daytona? Is Daytona down there? Not familiar with the geography down there, but I know our listeners are. Somebody's going to give you a good suggestion. Now, based off the previous suggestions, you might have a listener be like, "Have you been to Michigan in the summer? Could you stop by Michigan really quick?"
Yeah, well, that's why I gave a very specific.
Very specific.
New Orleans to Orlando.
Don't suggest anything in like the Great Lakes region. Cape Cod. Probably not going to fit.
Currently, as a placeholder, St. George Island Park is there, or St. George Island is where we're currently staying.
Drive up to the Cape.
Up
to the Cape real quick.
It's quite a detour.
Yeah. Up to the Cape, back down to Orlando.
Yeah.
Just more driving time. That's what you're looking for, right?
Yeah. That'll be happening in a couple of weeks' time. We're going to be raising money for charity for Advent Health is who we're doing it with. We are raising money to raise awareness for men's health and for cancer charity and that kind of thing. There'll be a place we can direct people to donate, and we'll also be doing a bunch of content on the road, which will be
you and your dad.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
he's got like GoPros and all sorts of gimbals and all kinds of crap. So.
Oh, this is serious here.
Yeah.
Yeah, your dad's more famous than you are.
Within the medical profession.
Yeah. He's not. I mean, not in the NFL.
No.
Not in the NFL world, but it's a big name, medical profession. So, anyway, that's it. Anything else?
No.
We missed like 15 teams that all had great off seasons. If we didn't mention your team, we meant to. They had a great off season too.
Maybe they didn't.
We're all optimistic. Everybody had.
The Lions had a good off season.
I figured you might mention the Lions again, not necessarily for like this season, maybe, but.
Yeah, no, they had a good offseason. There were teams that didn't, though.
That's for a different show.
There were teams that really didn't have a good offseason.
Last year, the biggest show that we did last year was when you gave the fatal flaws for all 32 teams with Austin. Are you bringing that back
people
with
like
Austin?
The negativity.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I tried to bring the positivity.
People didn't like that as much.
And you came back with the fatal flaws.
Yeah.
Thing cooked.
All right.
Cooking. Best show of the offseason last
people
year.
whinge about the negativity, but that's what everyone wants to hear.
Yeah. Except when some people bring it to the table. When it's all you bring to the table, it's too negative. You know what I'm saying? Can't be too negative all the time.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Thursday, or at least Sam will.